Mmm, looks delicious. In this episode, we will be looking at the Passover feast that the Hebrews celebrate the last night in Egypt before they leave for the promised land through the desert. Moses has been instructed by God to inform his people that night they are to eat the Passover feast. And in this way, he is bringing them into a covenant relationship with him. So every family then was to have a, a year old perfect specimen goat or lamb, slaughter it, pour the blood out, and then roast it, and then celebrate a meal with the family together. If the family was too small, then they could join with a neighbor. And every single one of them was required to participate in this meal because, as I said, it was a covenant meal. There's a lot of significance in the way they go about celebrating this Passover feast. For one, the animal is a perfect specimen. The animal is the one who's going to be slaughtered. And basically, God is making the point that the animal is representing them in this covenant relationship. Just as the animal is a pure specimen, and just as the animal lays down its life for the benefit of the family, in the same way, in this relationship with God, they would be like this animal, striving to be a pure specimen and living for others rather than for themselves, and in that way, being free of sin by being faithful to the observance of God's laws. So, in eating this meal, they're all committing themselves to it. And so you can see there's a sense of urgency, there's a sense of great joy. And the other expectation or requirement is that they eat this meal with their loins girt, with the sandals on their feet, as if they've got to eat this meal in a hurry because they are leaving Egypt. They are getting out of Egypt as soon as possible. So you can see there's a great sense of urgency. And then the last requirement is that they take some of the blood of the animal that they slaughtered and ate and sprinkle it on their doorposts and lintels so that the angel of death would spare them and would basically be an angel of life to them, God's life, and in the case of the Egyptians, be an angel of death. Several centuries later, we now come to the time of Jesus. And in the time of Jesus, this was the tradition with which they celebrated the Passover feast. During the Passover feast, they would drink wine 4 times. At the very beginning, they would fill their cups, and then this cup would be called the Kiddush cup, or the cup of sanctification, where the head of the family would then make a prayer asking God to sanctify them. You can already hear echoes of the first Passover meal as they are getting ready to partake of this meal. Then, after that is done, the meal is brought before them. Herbs, bitter sauce, the animal, the roasted lamb, unleavened bread. See, and then the father of the family makes a proclamation, and the proclamation is called the Kiddush cup. In this proclamation, basically, the leader of the family is telling them their story of how God saved them, brought them from out of slavery from Egypt into the promised land. And in doing so, God was faithful to them. Uh, Never abandoned them, was always faithful to them. And then he makes a very striking point when he says, and God has asked us to do this in remembrance of that event, of God's saving power enacted in that event. See, do this in remembrance. In the Greek, this word remembrance is translated anamnesis. In the Hebrew, zikaron. And the best way of explaining it or translating it into English, remembrance would be translated as this was an event that took place in history a long time ago. While it was an event that took place in history a long time ago, it is a reality that was present then and has been present with us all through the centuries. In other words, it's an ever present event, reality in this relationship between God and us. Jesus celebrates the Eucharist within the context of the Passover meal. And so when you read the sacred text, the Gospels, you see very clearly that no mention is made of the first cup, the Kiddush cup. But in Luke's Gospel, we definitely have mention that is made of the second cup, the cup of proclamation, and the Berakah cup, the cup of thanksgiving. The cup of thanksgiving is after the meal, after Jesus has had his meal with the disciples. That is when he takes unleavened bread and he says, "Take and eat, this is my body." And then he takes the Berakah cup, the third cup, and he offers it to them and he says, "Take and drink, this is my blood of the new and everlasting covenant, which will be poured out for you," which will happen the following day. In the case of the first Passover feast of the Old Testament, it was the animal who was killed, not the people. And so this was God's way of saying the animal hopefully will be a true and proper representative of the way you will relate with me in our relationship. In the new covenant, Jesus himself is the lamb of sacrifice because he's talking about his own blood. Several things to mention here. John the Baptist was already given this intimation, this revelation at the baptism of Jesus, that Jesus is indeed the Son of God, and he saw the Holy Spirit descending upon him. And so he tells Andrew and this other disciple, who most probably in chapter 1 of John, who most probably was John the Evangelist, tells them, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." Here is Jesus then saying that he is the Lamb who is offering his blood on our behalf. Now, it was anathema in the Old Testament for any Jew to partake of blood, either in their own cooking or when they offered the animal in sacrifice, because blood signified life and God was the author of life. And so if you in any way drank blood or used blood in cooking, you were basically sacrificing, killing, eating God. Jesus, being God, can say, "You can drink of my blood because I am God, and I am therefore sharing my life with you." There's a profound difference, but Jesus came to fulfill the law and the prophets, and one place where he is fulfilling it preeminently in ways unimaginable is in the Passover feast. So they drink, and then when he offers them his blood, wine changed into his blood, and they drink of it, that's the third cup, the Beraka cup, the cup of thanksgiving. That is when they begin singing the Hallel Psalms. There are 7 of them, Psalms 113 through 118. These are Psalms of praise and thanksgiving, commemorating the first Exodus event. See? And so it's also reminding them of their story. So Jesus and his disciples, and we read this in the New Testament accounts, they begin singing. We don't know which psalms they are singing, but they are singing the psalms. However, they leave the upper room without ending the meal in the traditional way. The meal in the traditional way ended with a drinking from the fourth cup. And when they drank from the fourth cup, because they were in a hurry, they just took a quick sip. Jesus and the disciples do not drink from the fourth cup in the upper room. And so the meal is not over. So then they go to Gethsemane, and Jesus takes 3 of his disciples with him as he is struggling in his agony in accepting his Father's will that he go to his crucifixion and death. That is when he is asking God. You can see how bitter this burden of becoming our sin is, and how it took everything out of Jesus. It gives you an understanding of how deeply, deeply loving Jesus is, even though it was doing violence to him. And his Father, who probably was suffering intensely with him, said, "My will has to be done by you, Son, or else they cannot become my sons and daughters." And so Jesus says, "Do this in remembrance of me," in the upper room. And when he says, "Do this in remembrance of me," he's basically saying, I will always be with you. I am always with you till the end of time, in my passion, crucifixion, death. Because while it is an event which took place a long time ago, once and for all, it's a truth, a reality, a fact that is always present in us. And you are living from it, out of it, through it, in it. So fast forward then to the agony. Here is Jesus receiving the cup, and he's saying to his Father, I'm finding great difficulty to complete the meal. But then you can see, but thy will be done, not mine. And so now Jesus accepts to drink from the cup for the 4th time, and therefore to go through this event which began as meal. And it cannot just be a meal, it's got to be a sacrificial meal. So now he's got to move from meal to sacrifice, or else the meal is incomplete and makes no sense. In the case of the old covenant meal, Passover meal, it was a sacrificial meal because the animal was the sacrifice. Okay? Here is Jesus himself. So he finally accepts. And then, as he's hanging on the cross and has given everything, see, even the remaining water and blood, that is given out upon his death when the centurion pierces his side. But just before that, Jesus establishes the church. He had already established Peter as taking his place and his successors as the minister of the palace, being the minister, the pope of the church. Jesus himself is the king of this new kingdom of Israel, but he has not yet installed the queen. And in the old kingdom of Israel, the queen was always the queen mother. So just before he dies, he installs our Blessed Mother as the queen mother of the church, represented by John, the beloved disciple. Everyone knows Jesus is not talking about John being given his own mother, who was there. Salome was there. His own mother was there. Jesus was not referring to his mother. Jesus was referring to his own mother, Mary. So after he has done all of that, then it's time for him to complete the meal. And so he takes a sip. He says, I thirst. They offer him wine, he mixed with myrrh. He takes a sip. That is when he ends the meal, because this is how the meal would end. It is finished. And as soon as he says it is finished, the meal is over. He has tied together the upper room with Calvary. He has tied together heaven, where his sacrifice is ever present, he's being adored and worshipped nonstop. Heaven is tied to earth. And we are citizens of heaven. We belong to God's covenant family. When we celebrate Eucharist in our churches, we are celebrating Eucharist along with everyone in heaven. We are all in this celebration together. So that's the amazing thing about the Passover meal, which began in Egypt, the first Passover meal. Who would have realized the far-reaching implications and consequences that our loving Father had in store for us? And so you can see in making great saints the immense blessings and graces and support that we will receive and are receiving continually, because never forget this: you are God's very own son. You are God's very own daughter. And he will refuse you nothing in your pilgrimage into his heart, and in this way becoming a great saint. God bless you.
Making Great Saints is made possible by Our Lady's Healing Center and God's Embrace Ministries. For more information on Our Lady's Healing Center's healing program, visit OurLadiesHealingCenter.com. For ongoing formation and daily discipleship through God's Embrace Ministries, visit godsembrace.org.